The retired Marine tightened his grip on the barn door as the old woman stepped slowly through the falling rain. Her coat was soaked nearly black from the storm, and one shaking hand clutched a faded leather suitcase against her chest. She looked exhausted, fragile, harmless. But Ranger, the retired military K-9 beside him, suddenly growled low in his throat, not at her, at the empty road behind her. Eli Mercer felt the hair rise along the back of his neck. The dog had not reacted like that since Afghanistan, and somewhere beyond the darkness, headlights appeared through the rain. If this story stays with you, don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell, and stay until the end. Because what the Marine discovered that night changed 3 lives forever. Rain hammered against the tin roof of the old Kentucky farm, while cold wind pushed through the broken fence lines surrounding the property. The land stretched across miles of muddy pasture outside Briar Ridge, quiet except for distant thunder rolling through the hills. Eli Mercer stood beneath the barn light with tired eyes fixed on the storm. At 46 years old, the former United States Marine looked like a man held together by routine alone. Deep lines marked his face beneath a rough beard streaked with gray. His broad shoulders still carried the posture of a soldier, even after years away from service. He rarely smiled anymore. Most people in town assumed he preferred isolation. The truth was simpler. Silence hurt less than memories. Beside him sat Ranger, the retired German shepherd who had served 2 combat tours at Eli's side. The dog was older now, his muzzle touched with silver and one ear permanently torn from an explosion overseas. But Ranger still watched the world with calm intelligence, especially strangers. The storm had started just after sunset. Eli had been preparing to close the barn when he noticed movement near the road. At first he thought it was debris blowing through the rain. Then lightning flashed across the fields. A woman stood near the gate. She looked to be somewhere in her 70s, maybe older, thin beneath her soaked coat, white hair pressed against her cheeks by the wind. She carried a small suitcase that looked older than the truck parked beside the barn. She didn't approach immediately, just stood there quietly, waiting. Eli walked halfway across the muddy yard before stopping several feet away. Ranger remained beside him, alert but silent. "You lost?" Eli finally asked. The woman shook her head slowly. "No." Her voice was soft. "Tired. I just need somewhere warm for the night." Eli glanced toward the empty road, disappearing into darkness behind her. Nobody drove this far into Briar Ridge during storms unless they had a reason. "You got family nearby?" "Noba town's 12 miles east, I know." Something about the way she answered unsettled him. Calm, certain, like she already understood there were no better options left. Rainwater dripped from the edge of her sleeves. Her hands trembled slightly from cold. For a moment, Eli almost refused. Then Ranger stood up. The shepherd walked directly past Eli and approached the woman slowly. She froze, clutching the suitcase tighter. But instead of barking, Ranger pressed gently against her leg and sat beside her in the rain. Eli stared. Ranger did not trust people easily anymore, especially strangers. The old woman looked down at the dog with watery eyes. Her fingers shook as she rested one hand against his scarred head. "He reminds me of someone," she whispered. Thunder rolled across the hills again. Eli finally exhaled. "Come inside before you freeze." The farmhouse smelled faintly of wood smoke and black coffee. The place was small and worn from years of neglect, but warm enough against the storm outside. Old military photographs still hung along the hallway walls beside faded medals Eli never bothered packing away. The woman sat quietly at the kitchen table while Eli placed a cup of coffee in front of her. Ranger remained close beside her chair, watching. Not protective, comforting. That bothered Eli more than aggression would have. "What's your name?" he asked. "Margaret Doyle." "You traveling alone?" She nodded once. "You always pick random farms during thunderstorms?" A faint smile touched her tired face. "Only when I run out of choices." Eli leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Something still felt off. Not dangerous exactly, just unfinished. Margaret noticed the Marine Corps photo hanging near the kitchen doorway. A younger Eli stood beside several soldiers overseas, Ranger sitting proudly in front of them. "You were deployed overseas," she said quietly. "Long time ago. My husband served." Eli nodded politely. "Army?" "No," her eyes drifted toward Ranger. "Marine. The room fell silent except for rain tapping against the windows. Margaret wrapped both hands around the coffee cup like she was trying to warm something deeper than cold fingers. I had a son once, she said softly. He wanted to join the Marines too. Eli noticed the change in her expression immediately. Pain, deep and old. What happened? She looked down at the table. Life happened. Before Eli could respond, Ranger suddenly lifted his head toward the front windows. A low growl rumbled through his chest. Headlights swept across the yard outside. Eli's body reacted before his mind did. Years of military instinct returned instantly. A dark pickup truck rolled slowly through the mud toward the farmhouse. Margaret's face lost all color. "No," she whispered. Eli turned toward her sharply. "Who is that?" She didn't answer fast enough. Truck doors slammed outside. Ranger moved toward the front door, growling harder now. Every muscle in the dog's body tightened. Then came the pounding. "Mom!" A man shouted through the storm. "Open the damn door!" Margaret closed her eyes. Fear spread across her face so suddenly it chilled Eli more than the thunder outside. "That's my son," she whispered. Another bang rattled the door. "I know you're in there." Eli stepped toward the window carefully. A man in his 40s stood outside in the rain beside another younger man near the truck. Angry, impatient, dangerous. "You should leave," Margaret whispered quickly. "I don't want trouble for you." Eli ignored her. "Why's he chasing you?" Tears filled her eyes. "Because he wants what's left of my house." Outside, the pounding grew louder. "Open this door now." Ranger barked violently. The sound shook the room. Eli had heard that bark before only once during combat operations overseas. It meant the dog sensed immediate threat. Eli calmly reached beside the doorway where an old shotgun rested against the wall. He didn't point it, just held it visibly as he opened the front door halfway. Rain exploded inside with cold wind. The older man stopped immediately when he saw the Marine standing there. "She's coming with us," the man snapped. "No," Margaret whispered behind Eli. The Marine's eyes narrowed. "Doesn't sound like she agreed." "That's my mother." "Then maybe stop screaming at her in the middle of the night." The younger man near the truck muttered something under his breath. Ranger's growl deepened instantly. Eli noticed alcohol on both men immediately. "We've been looking for her all day," the older man continued. "She's confused. She wanders." Margaret stood behind Eli. Her voice shook but remained firm. "I'm not confused, Daniel. The rain fell harder between them. You emptied my bank accounts," she continued quietly. "You tried selling my house before I even signed the papers." Daniel's face darkened instantly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about." Silence settled across the porch. Eli understood everything now. Margaret hadn't run away from home. She had escaped it. Daniel stepped forward angrily. "This is family business." "No," Eli replied coldly. "This became my business when you started threatening an old woman during a storm." For several seconds, nobody moved. Only thunder echoed across the fields. Then Ranger stepped onto the porch beside Eli. The German Shepherd stared directly at Daniel without blinking. Calm, focused, ready. Daniel took one step backward. Smart decision. Eventually, the younger man grabbed Daniel's arm. "Let's go." "This isn't over," Daniel warned. Eli's expression never changed. "Yeah, it is." The truck finally disappeared back down the muddy road. Inside the farmhouse, Margaret sat silently at the kitchen table while tears rolled down her cheeks. She looked embarrassed more than emotional, like someone ashamed of needing help. Eli placed another cup of coffee beside her quietly. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes," he said, "I did." For the first time that night, Ranger rested his head gently against her knee. Margaret smiled through tears as her trembling fingers moved through the dog's fur. "He trusts you," Eli said softly. The old woman looked toward the storm outside. "Maybe he knows what loneliness smells like." That line stayed with Eli long after the rain stopped. Over the next several days, Margaret remained at the farm, at first only temporarily, then naturally, quietly, like she had always belonged there somehow. She cooked meals Eli forgot to make for himself, fixed old curtains, planted flowers beside the greenhouse, and slowly the farmhouse stopped feeling empty. Even Ranger changed. The old military dog followed her everywhere, now, calmer than Eli had seen him in years. One evening, Margaret discovered an old framed photograph hidden beneath dusty bookshelves in the living room. A younger Eli stood beside several Marines overseas. One soldier beside him smiled directly at the camera. Margaret froze. Her hand began shaking. "That's him," she whispered. Eli looked up from repairing an old lantern. "What?" Tears filled her eyes instantly. "That Marine beside you." Eli stared at the photograph. "His name was Thomas Doyle," he said quietly. "Best man I ever served with." Margaret covered her mouth. "That was my husband." The room went completely silent. Suddenly everything made sense. The way she recognized the Marine photographs. The way Ranger trusted her instantly. The strange feeling Eli had the moment she arrived. Years ago, during one terrible night overseas, Thomas Doyle had saved Eli's life during an ambush. Pulled him from burning wreckage moments before another explosion tore through the road. Thomas died 2 weeks later. Eli never forgot him. Neither had Ranger. Margaret wept quietly while holding the old photograph against her chest. "He wrote letters about you," she whispered. "About the dog, too." Eli looked toward Ranger lying beside the fireplace. The old German shepherd lifted his head slowly, almost like he remembered, and maybe he did. Outside, the final snow of winter melted across the Kentucky hills while warm light glowed softly from the farmhouse windows for the first time in years. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up quietly, carrying an old suitcase through the rain while a loyal dog remembers what people forget. And sometimes the family we lose finds its way back to us when we need it most.